There's the pass to Leitner. Puts it up. Yes!
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Camera Chronicles. I'm your co-host, Max Rego, joined today by my fellow co-host, Mr. Alex Jackson. Alex, how we doing?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
Good. I'm good. Thanks for coming back on. We got our sports editor for Volume 118 for the Chronicle, Mr. Jonathan Levitan. Jonathan, how we doing?
Always a pleasure to be here, Max.
Yep, always great to have you on, my man. And we have a special guest today. So obviously, in 2 days, Duke and North Carolina will be facing off. So we figured we might want to get a little expert on the Tar Heels. So we have Mr. Hunter Nelson. He's the sports editor of the Daily Tar Heel, the North Carolina student paper. Hunter, introduce yourself.
Hey guys, first of all, Max, thank you so much for having me on the show. I know as soon as you reached out, I had no other choice but to say yes, because it's always great to chop it up, talk ball, of course. But yeah, no, you basically just mentioned it. My name is Hunter Nelson. I am the sports editor for the Daily Tar Heel. I've had the chance to be on the desk for a couple of years now, was an assistant the past 2 years. So, I've been sort of following the athletic programs kind of closely. I had a chance to, play you guys a couple weeks ago in our rivalry game, to get ready for Rivalry Challenge, which was a fun experience. But just happy to be on to talk ball and, like I said, get ready for this game on Saturday.
Yeah, definitely. It was it's our second annual Chronicle DTH pickup basketball. A couple years off because of the pandemic and all that stuff, and scheduling. Just scheduling stuff was tough for a couple of years, and it was a great time. And we'll shout it out at the end, but if you're listening to this, we have our fundraising challenge between the Chronicle and the Daily Tar Heel. Check out either website and donate. Obviously, we're going to shout out both of our websites throughout. So, if you're listening, feel free to check it out. But let's get right into it. Hunter, again, thanks for joining. Alex, I'll kick it over to you. 2 days from now, Duke, North Carolina, 6:30 on ESPN. Blue Devils sit at 16-6, 7-4 in the ACC. North Carolina 15-7, also 7-4 in the ACC. I know North Carolina lost, and Hunter, you could talk about that game last night a little bit in the sec. I know North Carolina lost last night, but in my opinion, both of these teams are playing some of their best basketball this season. So, Alex, what's kind of the thing you're looking for going into Saturday?
Yeah, I think this is going to be a really fun matchup. I think these two teams are kind of in a similar position right now in their seasons, and they're both, like you said, playing some of their best basketball. So I think it's going to be a really exciting game. I had the chance to be in the student section in Cameron for the first time all season against Wake Forest earlier this week, and that was the vibe in Cameron is already like at a great level. So I'm really excited to see what it's going to look like for this matchup. And we're kind of at a point in the rivalry where it's kind of a new slate. I know we wrote a couple articles about the new face of the rivalry with two new head coaches on both teams now. So I'm excited for this kind of like inaugural new wave of the rivalry coming in. I think it's gonna be a really exciting game. And honestly, I think the two teams are pretty evenly matched up, even though like kind of the theme of our print edition is how they're different look teams versus like the veterans versus the rookies. But I think they're kind of evenly matched up, and it'll be a really exciting game.
Yeah, totally. Jonathan, you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think Alex covered a lot of what's on my mind right now. It was a good time watching a really good game between Pittsburgh and UNC last night. A little bit of a controversial ending. I don't know how you don't call that at the end, if I'm being perfectly honest. But interesting thing to me is the advantage that Duke has on its home court and how different these teams are on the home and on the road. The last team to beat Duke in Cameron was North Carolina. That's not a night any of us are going to forget anytime soon. And the other interesting thing to me is how many new parties there are to this. Beyond the coaches, I'm really interested to see how Pete Nance slides into this equation. Duke hasn't really seen a front court like that yet. I don't want to talk too long to get started, but my big question coming in is how that Nance-Bacot duo gives Lively and Filipowski trouble on defense, and how those matchups end up turning out, and how Scheyer ultimately wants his team to deal with that.
Yeah, totally. I think it'll be super interesting because, like you said, Jonathan, Duke hasn't had to face a front court like that. I mean, Nance and Bacot. I mean, Bacot's obviously playing like, again, one of the best bigs in the country, but Nance is a very super unique player in his own right. He's not, not quite Brady Manic from three, but he still is like that stretch kind of player. So Hunter, what's kind of the consensus about North Carolina right now? I know, the loss last night to Pitt, again, like Jonathan said, a little controversial, but what's kind of the vibe, I guess, going within the program and just, on campus going into the game on Saturday?
Yeah, no, I think UNC is sort of in a crazy spot this year because obviously coming in as the preseason #1 team, everyone had high expectations for them, 4 returning starters, a lot of solid bench pieces coming back, but they quickly fell to the top 25 faster than any team has ever done in the history of the AP, ranking. So sort of a weird start there. I think the best way to there's one word to summarize their season thus far, I'd probably say it's been lackadaisical. You sort of hear the players after the game say many of the same things they've been talking about for the past couple of years now, where, after a close, win or a narrow loss, it's like, oh, we're going to figure it out at the end, going to figure it out. But over the past couple of years, UNC's been a bubble team. And I guess you never really took those words seriously. But last April, we got to see the ceiling that this team could reach. So I guess now you sort of start to wonder when they do put the pieces together this time around. But yeah, you mentioned it. Yesterday's game against Pitt was, sort of a dogfight, if you will, a really physical game on both sides. I think you said something about the last call. I think Caleb Love didn't get the shot off away anyways. So upon further review, it probably would have been waved off. But yeah, no, it's been a unique season so far for UNC. I think, like you mentioned, Pete Nance in the front court at the 4, not quite the same player that Brady Manic has been. And by that, I mean, he doesn't necessarily look for his own shot as much as Manic did. Manic, if you guys, remember, had one of the quickest triggers in the country. Like if he caught it, it was going up, more often than not. So different, style of play there. But overall, I think, yeah, these are both two teams slowly starting to find their rhythm. And UNC before yesterday did win 10 out of the past 12. So I guess maybe they're getting there slowly but surely. But yeah, yesterday's loss sort of, called that into question, so to speak.
What matchup? Looking at Duke's team, and then you obviously have all the knowledge about UNC. What matchups are you most excited for heading into this game?
Yeah, it was actually really cool getting to read our stories that came in because we talked a lot about the front court matchups and who's going to sort of match up against Filipowski. The Bacot Filipowski matchup is probably going to be the one that I think everyone should circle for obvious reasons. Both players are ACC Player of the Year candidates, probably the front runners at this point. Filipowski can obviously step out, knock down the 3 ball a little bit. So it'll be interesting to see if maybe Leaky Black gets some assignment on him a little bit. But also the guards. We talked about, the veteran team of UNC and sort of the younger, inexperienced team of Duke. But Jeremy Roach, he's been solid all year, as you guys probably know better than I do. But the Jeremy Roach Caleb Love battle could be something to watch just because they've been playing for a couple of years now. And that's pretty much, I think those are the 2 main ones to focus on there. But I think, yeah, just the main storyline of experience versus youth is something that I think a lot of people have gravitated towards, and we're going to see again on Saturday.
I think one of the things I've noticed about these two teams, like, I know, we covered Duke, and that's obviously the team that we know the most about, but seeing this UNC team kind of grow up over the last couple of years has been interesting because I remember the first time the Caleb Love, RJ Davis backcourt played Duke. It was in an empty Cameron 2 years ago, almost 2 years to the day, because it was the first one of the season. And I just remember, those 2 guys, whenever they're playing with confidence and whenever they're feeding off of each other, it seems like they can really get it going. And that but that can only happen, I feel like, when, and I think, Hunter, you can speak more to this, but Hubert Davis always emphasizing they have to play inside out. Like their first option has to be Armando Bacot. And I think last night he had like the 4th most shot attempts. And I think, and Seth Davis had a good tweet where like that should basically never happen. Like he's, along with Oscar Tshiebwe and Drew Timme coming into the year, like those were the 3 like top National Player of the Year candidates. It hasn't worked out quite that way. There are a lot of, Zach Edey's kind of running away with it, but I think Armando Bacot was the second team All-American, according to a lot of midseason picks. So, if you can get, if our Bacot can get Duke's guys into foul trouble, I think that's going to be a big issue for Duke. And if that happens, then the guards, I think, can play off of him. And, you guys can speak more to this, but I just think it's going to be a game that's going to rely on both teams trying to play inside out, because, neither team is a very good 3-point shooting team. They're going to, Duke doesn't pound it inside quite as much. They don't have a guy like Bacot who can just post up like that. But I think it's going to be a game that's going to, be physical, physical on the interior. Both teams are going to get fouled a ton. And I think it's going to come down to just a couple possessions late. And then that's when I think the guards are really going to have a role, because I think that's going to be where Roach for Duke and Caleb Love are really going to have to step up. So, Jonathan, any thoughts on some of the matchup stuff?
Yeah, just hearing you talk about the way that. Sorry, can you hear me? Okay. Just hearing you talk about the way that UNC plays through Bacot. One of the things that interested me most this year is that Duke is a really solid defensive team, but they're also not the kind of team that's going to hit you at the point of attack. They're going to sit back and rely on their length and trust that they're going to be able to stop you from getting 3-point shots off and have lively protect under the rim. So the matchup that is most interesting to me, which is kind of a complete non sequitur from all of that, I just wanted to comment that, is I'm really interested to see where Tyrese Proctor fits into all of this. You talked about the backcourt, and we've seen Jeremy Roach go up against both Caleb Love and RJ Davis, but Proctor has not just become part of that backcourt. He's started to take over more ball handling duties, which is something he did when Roach missed that, I want to say, 4-game stretch with his toe injury that he suffered all the way back in November, but it's really been bugging him. It seems like it still is bugging him from time to time, but he's playing tougher basketball. His shooting splits are still not where he wants them to be, it seems like, or not where the team wants them to be, but starting to hit timely shots. And on the defensive end, he's got length. He's 6'5" and he's strong. At the end of the day, this is his first Duke UNC game, though, and like we've talked about, these games are different beasts. And I think that in a vacuum, he's ready to go up against Davis and Love, but those guys have been here before, and not only have they been there before, but they've excelled in this moment.
I think one of the things that it's really impressed me with Proctor the last couple of weeks, because like he is the main ball handler now, is his patience, like the way he reads screens. And I think it's honestly similar. I think there are some slight differences, but I think him and RJ Davis are a little similar in how they read the court and see the court. I mean, they're both coming off screens. They're both super patient. They both like to hit their mid-range shots. And I think that opens it up for Roach. Roach has some experience playing off the ball. I know he's a point guard by body type and height and skill set kind of, but he also has that ability and that experience playing off of like kind of a lead guard. I mean, he played a lot off of Wendell Moore last year, and Trevor Keels to an extent. And then the year before, there were times where he would play with Jordan Goldwire or DJ Stewart would be handling the ball. So it's, he's never really been like the lead point guard. It's really been a by committee. He's really been part of committees the last couple of years. And now that there's Proctor playing that lead guard role, it just takes a lot of stress off of Roach. And he still looks like he, comes up limping a little, hobbled a little bit on some plays where he just like gets nicked up in the toe. But for me, he looks healthy for the most part. So Alex, what you got?
I saw the last game that there was one play where he got his leg tangled up and kind of came away grimacing, but other than that, it was, for the most part, he seems to be kind of back to normal. It's just like maybe every once in a while, like a hit on the foot can kind of send him into a little bit of pain.
Yeah, totally. Hunter, what's the, you talked about some of the main guys. I think you talked kind of I guess offensively, kind of the big four that UNC's got with Davis, Love, Nance, and Bacot. But who are some of the role guys that come to mind? Obviously, for me, the first guy is Leaky Black, but I think he's a name that's pretty familiar to most listeners, considering I believe this is his 5th year now at North Carolina. So who are some of the guys who you think could, could have a role outside of those top couple scorers.
Yeah, no, I think when you look at UNC's roster, UNC is a team that relies more on its starters than pretty much anyone else in the country. I think in terms of bench minutes, I think they're averaging around 18 a game, which is somewhere in the 300s. I don't have the exact number in front of me, but I will say in recent weeks, the one sort of big question mark is who's been that backup guard, just because Caleb Love and RJ Davis, they can both sort of spell each other out once one does go to the bench. And obviously, we've seen them, share the floor together a lot. But DeMarco Dunn, I think, is probably the first guy off the bench, and he's been that for probably the past week and a half. Obviously, early in the season, Puff Johnson, he's had some breakout games. Even last year, we saw in the national championship. He's been their sixth man at the beginning of the year, but he's sort of been battling a little bit of knee soreness. It's been sort of in and out of the rotation since then. But as you mentioned, yeah, Leaky Black is sort of the Swiss Army knife offensively and defensively for the team. But if there was one particular player that might see extended run, it would be DeMarco Dunn. Like I said, his best asset at this point is probably his shooting. He doesn't shoot from, I guess, a great clip necessarily, but he has the green light when he does get open, and he does try to let it fly. He's an aggressive attacker. So if there was one player, I would probably point to him. Jalen Washington too. I know even some NBA scouts. He's a former, I think, 5-star recruit, but then he had some ACL injuries in high school. And as people are starting to watch him play now, they say that he could actually potentially be the best NBA prospect. Maybe not this year, but eventually down the line on this team. So as you mentioned, it's going to be a physical game. If Baycott gets in foul trouble, and they have to worry about that, then first year Jalen Washington, he can be the guy stepping up.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the North Carolina got to the national title and only lost by 3, but kind of the reason they didn't win that game was just because of how little depth they had. It seems like they have more depth this year because, I don't know, I don't have the numbers in front of me from that Kansas game, but from what I remember, besides Puff Johnson, they really only played those 5 guys. Was the 4 returners and then plus Manic. So what's the kind of the depth situation? Is it just 7 guys for the most part?
For the most part, yeah. And I guess another name I probably should mention is another backup point guard, Seth Trimble. He's another first-year player. He's, I think, a top 40 recruit coming in. Sort of offensively raw at this point. Hasn't really done much on that end, but the coaching staff's praised his defensive ability. At times he's taken on tough late game assignments in the backcourt position. So, like I said, he's been sort of in and out of the rotation recently. I think in sort of a game that Hubert Davis really wants to sort of put all his chips on the table, I think the rotation is going to get a little bit shorter, as we've seen. But to this point, I would say UNC probably has 7 or 8 guys that they play regularly. Sometimes we see guys like Tyler Nickel. He is actually the Virginia all-time leading scorer in high school, another first-year player. He comes in and I guess he provides a little bit of shooting off the bench, but I guess, yeah, for the most part, it's mostly like a seven-man show to this point.
Yeah, when it comes to Trimble, I can think about I think about what Duke's looking at also. With Jaden Shoot, he's kind of that young guy also, with top 50 recruit, but really hasn't played a ton this season. And with Dariq Whitehead still a question mark, Scheyer's turned to him a little bit, but for a game like Duke UNC, with that environment, he just might not be ready. And so I think that Duke could also look to shorten up their bench a little bit, unless there's a certain lack of 3-point shooting happening in the game, or depending on the game flow a little bit. I don't know how you guys feel about Shoot. He's been given some opportunities recently, but hasn't done a ton yet.
Yeah, I'll chime in. I think that the rotation and how deep each team goes into it, you were just talking about this, Hunter, is really interesting to me because if I remember, I don't think Hubert took his starting 5 out the entire second half last year in Durham. And I know that Scheyer hasn't really been dipping into his rotation too much. The nice thing for Duke is that they've had a lot of long rests, a lot of 1-2 punch, and then like 4 or 5 days off. They've got another game 2 days after this. It's an important one in Miami. And if the rest of this season so far has been any indication, I don't think that Duke or North Carolina is going to treat this one any bigger than it is in the grand scheme of the ACC. It's obviously a big deal emotionally and in terms of the rivalry, but fact of the matter is that I think that Duke is going to feel the need to dip into its bench a little bit deeper in a game like this. We've seen games with Whitehead out or with Roach out where they don't feel the need to go to shoot. Maybe they do this game. I think that as odd as it seems, where to put a freshman who doesn't really have any experience and clearly has some space to go on the defensive end on the floor against your biggest rival in a game that I think we'd be shocked if it doesn't come down to the wire on one side. I think he'll be out there, and I think he could give Duke some good shooting while he is.
Kind of sounded like you were talking yourself out of your own point there for a minute.
Yeah, kind of running circles around myself, but I'm sticking with it.
I agree. I think you look at the rotation without Whitehead, and John Scheyer had a press conference today, said they're trying to get him back. He's still uncertain whether he's going to play. But considering I was in Blacksburg covering that game with our managing editor Mike, one of our managing editors, Micah Hurwitz. It looked pretty bad, his injury. The fact that he's questionable for a game less than 2 weeks later, I think is pretty remarkable. But I can't predict whether he's going to play. But in the event that he doesn't play and he's not quite ready, I think to get some shooting at least, and to get some, just to open things up on the court. I mean, improve the spacing. I think you got to give Shoot a look at least. Again, he's not the defender that maybe you want going up against those really talented guards and two guards who are, for my money, I know Caleb Love has his inconsistencies, but in the last 5 minutes of a game, there are not many guards that I would trust more than those two guys, to be honest with you. Obviously I don't think you can play him and shoot in the last 5 minutes, but if you need just a couple minute stretch where he needs to give a guy like Roach or Proctor a breather in the backcourt, Shoot can hit a 3 or 2, get the crowd going, space the floor a little bit. And I think you can really develop that rotation for the rest of the season. Because again, like you said, Jonathan, I mean, it's an important game. Both teams are 7-4. Both teams, I believe, are tied for 6th in the ACC. Getting that double bye is really important for the AC tournament in Greensboro. And talent-wise, I think these are, along with Virginia, the two best teams in the ACC. But off their record, I mean, you got Clemson there, you got Miami, you got Pitt, who beat Carolina last night, obviously. It's going to be a dogfight, and you got to be able to have guys who can come in ready to go, because guys are going to have foul trouble, guys are going to get in, there are going to be injuries. It's a war of attrition, really, as you get into February and March. So I think you're going to have to put Shoot out there for a little bit if you're Scheyer. But Hunter, what's like, if you had to pick one, I guess we can kind of go into our main keys, but what's one thing? I know you kind of touched on, the inside battle, but what's one thing you're looking at, one area that will decide this game either way?
Yeah, I think honestly, what you mentioned earlier is probably going to be the main point of this one for UNC, and that's knocking down perimeter shots early in the game. I think playing inside through Baycott is, been their bread and butter the past couple of years. And, we haven't really seen him get many one-on-one looks inside so far this year, just because he's getting doubled, because there really isn't much spacing around him. I'm not really a fan of using a calculator during a basketball game per se, but I do have some numbers, I guess, pulled up here. Like UNC this year is 306th in three-point shooting, and over 23% of their points come from the foul line. So sort of with that, they really are trying to look to bully people inside and get to the charity stripe. But I think most of that is because they really do not feel comfortable spacing the floor at all. I think yesterday they were 5 for 27 from 3 or something like that. They're second to last in the ACC in assist percentage. They only assist on 46.4% of their field goals. So a lot of hero ball sort of going on. And I guess, that is what that is. And, you have two talented guards. They might try to take the game into their own hands at times. But I think, yeah, knocking down shots early, forcing the defense, because we've seen Duke's defense this year been, pretty solid to this point. But forcing the defense to play all the way to the 3-point line should theoretically give chances for what should be the team's best player inside, where he can go to work and have one of his more patented, high point, high rebound outings. But I think it really all starts with them sort of unlocking every chamber on the offensive end.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I think you mentioned the hero ball, and I think I remember vividly. I think Connor, you were at the Final Four, if I remember correctly, in New Orleans. I remember Hubert's press conference after the win against Duke, where he said basically, no matter who we're playing, no matter what the matchups are, their first goal is to throw it inside to Baycott, and they're going to play off of that. It seems like they were starting to get away from that early in the season, and then they kind of got back to their bread and butter the last couple of weeks. I watched some of the game. I missed literally the last 2 minutes. I had a meeting that literally started right at that time, and I kind of assumed Carolina was going to win the game because they had made that run. But it just seems like, for North Carolina, their bread and butter is playing through Baycott, and for Duke, I think what's a good contrast is, when Duke doesn't rely too much on Filipowski, that's when they're at their best. When they're sharing the ball, when they're moving it, and they've looked way better offensively. I think, Jonathan, you can talk a little bit about this. When they had that week-long break in between Clemson and Miami, Scheyer said that their goal was to work on their offense and work on their spacing, work on their ball movement. It seems like that's really improved. And I think there's just a different approach that I think is kind of pretty apparent between these two teams, that, Carolina needs to throw it inside to Baycott, and Duke really needs to have guys who can support Filipowski. And you saw that against Wake Forest, I think, for Duke. So.
Yeah, I think with UNC, it obviously comes pretty naturally spreading the wealth with scoring. I think they have 3 guys averaging above 16 a game. That's Baycott in the backcourt. But for Duke, I think what they've had to get used to is, okay, we have a guy who's playing great on offense. That's Filipowski, and everybody else is catching up. They've had to kind of take their medicine with that and grow as they go. Like you were up in Blacksburg, I think the last straw, even after Miami, the thing that told them they had to change was when Filipowski had 29 and 10 up there, and it wasn't enough. And then they come back this weekend, and I don't want to read too much into a win over a Georgia Tech team that just lost to Louisville, which is a whole nother can of worms. But they looked great on offense. And I talked about this earlier, but I attribute a lot of that to Proctor and the way that he's not only playing on defense, the way that he's moving the ball. He's got in his last 3 games or something, I think he's got 20 assists to a couple turnovers, which is great. I know against Georgia Tech, he had 8 assists and no turnovers. But the way you're making me think about it, that UNC really has to go through that one player. And Duke doesn't have that tried and true formula. Sometimes they come out and the offense doesn't look the same as it did the night before, but it certainly seems like it's moving in the right direction. I think it makes it a little bit more unpredictable for Davis and his staff to scout, but we'll see.
Yeah, totally. Alex, you got any thoughts? Any one main key to this one?
Yeah, for me, I think you mentioned this a bit earlier, but the main key is the fouling on at least for Duke. I look at kind of over the whole season, they have dealt with consistently having some key guys in foul trouble, and one of those guys being Derek Lively, who is going to be under the hoop a lot and definitely going to have to deal with the tough challenge that is Armando Baycott. And I know after the Pitt game, Scheyer talked about he only had 11 fouls. Scheyer talked about, or sorry, not after the Pitt game, after the Georgia Tech game, only 11 fouls. Scheyer talked about, Lively defending without his hands, kind of being really physical with his body instead to avoid getting into foul trouble. And that didn't really show up in their last game at all. So I think that for Duke to really stand much of a chance at all, they're going to need Lively on the court as much as possible. Ryan Young is just not the same defender he is. And so I think that, Lively's is still a young guy, and obviously Baycott has all the experience. And I'm not saying that Lively can't do it, but how is Duke gonna respond to, like defensively changing style wise and movement wise? How are they gonna, provide Lively with the necessarily help to get him into the position to, maintain his ability to be on the court? I think is the key for me.
I'm gonna hop in on Lively real fast. I'm obviously we've all been thinking a lot about this game, and I'm pretty bullish on what Lively's gonna look like. He's been great the last few games, even against Virginia Tech, which was a tough loss for Duke. He's clearly coming to his own a little bit. I'm proud to say that I have and remain to be a Derek Lively the second believer, even though it's been a little bit of a struggle at some points this season, especially on the offensive end. I just want to say that I think you're right about there are some concerns with a guy like Baycott, who's so good at getting the line, and a guy like Lively, who is clearly such a good defender, who is learning how to take his chances and to lay off at the college level to stay out of foul trouble. He's such a great team defender right now. And I think the key battle in this one is whether he can win the individual battle against Baycott, because I think that would be the thing that pushes Duke over the top. I don't know how they win that game if they don't get that.
Yeah, I think one of the things that is interesting is like Lively is good. It seems like there's slight improvement with him defending without fouling. That's the thing that Scheyer has been harping on with him, but this is going to be his toughest matchup of the year. I mean, the disparity between him and Ryan Young, their playing time, I think is going to be super interesting because I think, Jonathan, you said you've been a believer in Derek Lively. I am. I think he's a really, really good defender and really ahead of where most college freshman centers are defensively. I really have been a big believer in Ryan Young the whole year. I really like his tenacity inside, his grit. But as a one-on-one defender against Armando Baycott, that's a different story. So I think you really have to have Lively in there for most of the key stretches. And that's going to rely on foul trouble. So I think it's a super interesting kind of balancing act because you want Young in there for his offense, and he can draw fouls as well. He's really good at getting to the foul line for a big guy out of the post, but defensively, Lively's far superior with his help defense and with his rim protection. And against Baycott, I mean those ball screens, like Lively's going to be the guy that's going to be the main guy to defend those. So, you guys want to get into some score predictions for the game? I feel like that's kind of where we're at. I think one thing to note, and Hunter, you could chime in here. First matchup between John Scheyer and Hubert Davis. Hunter, you had an interesting column. I read yesterday, I think, on like can this game and can future Duke Carolina games kind of live up to what like the spectacle that last year was. I think it's pretty impossible to just from the magnitude of that game in Cameron and then the Final Four game. But any thoughts on what the future of Duke North Carolina is with these two guys? I think it's super interesting how they're both former guards. So if you want to talk about that.
Yeah, definitely. First of all, thanks for the read. I know it goes a long way, so appreciate you there. But no, I will say, no, it's really cool because I think specifically over the past 3-4 years, we've seen so many different stages and stories of this rivalry. I know the 2019-2020 season, UNC was, historically bad. So there was that chapter, and that was interesting. And then the following season was COVID. And then last year was sort of the year of the farewell. And this year we have a whole new storyline, as you mentioned. Two alums of their respective schools. I guess both relatively, Hubert's a little bit older, but younger coaches that, should seem like they would be around for a little bit of time here. So it's going to be an interesting chapter to see where it goes for sure. Like you said, two guards, two guys that, sort of been able to shoot the ball in their careers, which is sort of interesting because, neither team can really shoot the ball particularly well now. But I guess, the coaches can't lace them up. But I think, it'll be interesting. I guess I'm getting into a prediction. I originally did give UNC the edge for this one. And it was kind of funny because Duke fans might not necessarily realize this, but I've seen UNC, watching, covering this beat for the past couple of years. I truly do believe the two best games UNC had played in my time here were the two wins over Duke last year. Like for whatever reason, like UNC does not, that is not really the standard. The players might say that it is, but it just frankly hasn't been the case. I've seen some crazy losses over the past, couple of seasons, but I think after losing to Pittsburgh yesterday, one of the main things that our writers, Evan Rogers, Gwen Peace, talked about, even Brendan Marks for The Athletic. I know he's sort of a friend of both programs here, so shout out to him. But they talked about UNC's toughness sort of being called into play. And I think when you're heading into a rivalry game and, your questions of toughness are already sort of being publicized a little bit, as cliche as it might sound, I think you do play with a chip on your shoulder. And as we mentioned, just, go back to the offensive principles of getting inside and playing through Baycott and letting the offense go from there. But if I had to put a score on this one, I do think both offenses will click just because that's what typically happens in rivalry games. But I'm going to say 76-71 UNC is my score prediction.
That's, I think, pretty similar. Most of our writers have it in the 70s, maybe low 80s. But Alex, what do you got?
Yeah, I'm of the similar beliefs of both offenses kind of reaching their peak in this game. But I'm actually giving the edge to UNC. Just I've seen Duke play a lot, and I'm really harping on the foul trouble thing, but I know that the experience for UNC, and we just talked about, they elevate in this game for sure. I think the experience will kind of wear down Duke in the second half, and it's gonna be trouble. I think UNC has a real shot to give Duke their first home loss this year. And I think it's going to happen somewhere in the high 70s, low 80s. So yeah, maybe like, I think if for our beats picks, I think I gave 77-70, something like that. Right around there, kind of similar to what you just said. Yeah, I think this is going to be a tough game. It's Duke's toughest game all year to date at least. So I'm excited, but I think UNC has the slight edge right now.
Yeah. Levitan, you want to go?
Yeah, so I picked Duke, and I'll go ahead and say that I'm not particularly confident about it, but I don't know if I'd feel particularly confident the other way either. And I think I touched on this already. I just like the way that Duke matches up defensively. And I'm of the mind, having watched the team for half a season now, that when Duke has that good matchup defensively, and they have a few options offensively, and obviously Filipowski's always there, they're a tough team to beat. And he obviously goes deeper than the stat sheet, but with what Duke is doing at the 3-point line against a team that's shooting as poorly as UNC from the 3-point line, and knowing that Duke is going to sit back and hopefully put a lot of focus on Baycott, I would think. I'd be surprised if UNC is playing from ahead in this one. I think that if it ends up the other way, because I know that these rivalry things, we can analyze the on-court product all we want and make our predictions based off of that. UNC is obviously the team that has done this before. They came from behind in that game last year, even though they ended up winning it by a ton. And I think I'm pretty confident my halftime pick is Duke, and I'm a little less confident that my full-time pick is Duke. 74-70 is what I put down earlier. I'm sticking with that.
Yeah, that's an interesting one, because I think the game last year in Cameron, at least, was, sorry, there is a train going by my apartment as we speak. Perks of, I guess, living in Durham. But Duke led at halftime of the game in Cameron, but it was still a close game. I think it was a 2-point game. I just remember thinking, like, gosh, North Carolina is really staying in this for a little longer than I expected. I remember predicting, I think most of our predictions were double digits. I think I predicted like a 17-point Duke win, and I could not be further off. But I have North Carolina as well. Feels weird that this is a Duke-centric podcast. Three of the guys go to Duke, and three people to one are picking UNC, but the foul trouble is a big thing for me. I think Baycott's going to have a really big game, and I think, down the stretch, this is going to sound like a, cliche sports talk radio-y take, but they're on either team. The one guy I really, really trust, I trust Jeremy Roach to hit a big shot, but I like Caleb Love is one of the more clutch players, I think, in this rivalry's like recent history. And he always elevates his game against Duke. I don't know if there's any chip there, but I know he was a Duke fan growing up. Uh, I think it's human nature to maybe assume that has maybe something of a role in it, but I think Caleb Love is going to hit that shot late in the game to seal it, similar to the game in New Orleans last year. So I know people were listening to this. I know, a lot of my friends are going to kill me for picking Carolina, especially in my senior year. And three of us are seniors. Jonathan, you got one more year of these games, but I'm going to go with Carolina. I think it's going to be 83-76, I think was my pick. I think the Final Four game was 81-77, so similar pace, similar style. I just think Carolina salted away at the end. So weird that it's 3-1, but it's going to be I think we can all agree it's going to be a pretty close game. I don't think the line has come out yet, which is interesting. I think it's usually the day before. So
I wonder if you had to make a line for this game, do you throw it in there as a pick 'em? Who's favored going into this? Probably. I know Duke has a pretty heavy home court advantage when it comes to that sort of thing.
I think it's probably even in terms of just the matchup, but then like Vegas always factors in home court, and that for sure plays a factor here. So I think it would probably be Duke -2.5, -2.5 max. I would say right around there. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I don't know. I just remember, Virginia Tech was favored against Duke a couple weeks ago, and the old saying Vegas always knows, but I would say it's a pick 'em just straight up. On paper, North Carolina is the more experienced team. They probably have, I think Duke's ceiling is really high come March, but I think North Carolina has one of the higher ceilings in the country. We saw it last year in that run. Not only did they beat Duke, but they beat Baylor, a 1 seed. They beat defending Final Four team UCLA, and then the Elite Eight game wasn't an overly tough matchup, but that was where St. Peter's was like the best story in sports at the time, and they like pretty handily beat them. But I just think North Carolina is probably a better team on paper slightly, but I think the home court maybe is a couple points to take it from North Carolina -2 to even. So Hunter, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, as cliche as it sounds, I think in a rivalry like this, you toss all the lines out the window because it could be anything. I remember being a couple, conversations last year. I think in that last game in Cameron, I think Duke was favored by. You guys all mentioned, some double-digit predictions. I think Duke was favored by like 9 or something like that, and I almost looked at it like it was free money for Duke. Like I thought Duke was going to blow them out by 20 plus, and that was just me being, purely honest. You know what I mean? So I guess when stuff like this, like it really is just totally out of nowhere. I know if you look at sort of the advanced stats, advanced metrics, even though Duke, obviously UNC was the preseason #1 team, I think Duke is, we're sort of splitting hairs here, but if you look like Ken Pom and, Bart Torvik, any websites like that, Duke has the slight edge and they're at home, like you mentioned. But I guess if there was, a thing, I wouldn't be surprised. It was really anywhere between 4 points of, UNC -2 to Duke -2, anywhere in that range sounds about right.
Yeah, totally. That's a good spot to end on. I know we're going a little longer than maybe we anticipated, but it's Duke Carolina. What can you say? I guess. Do you guys, Jonathan and Hunter, you guys want to shout out kind of the content coming out over the next couple of days and our rivalry challenge once again?
Sure. Hunter, I'll speak real fast, and then you can too if you want. But we collaborate for the Rivalry Challenge. Obviously, it's a fundraiser. You can donate to both our papers at either one of our websites. But we collaborate to make a 2-sided issue. The front cover, depending which campus you're on, is either Duke or UNC, and the back cover is the other one of those. Half of it is from the Chronicle, half of it's from the Daily Tar Heel. Pick it up on stands on campus anytime tomorrow or over the weekend.
Yeah, to note before you go, Hunter, I just want to say if you're wanting to go to either website, that's DukeChronicle.com and dailytarheel.com. So just to get that out there.
For sure, yeah, and I guess just touching up on Jonathan's point, yeah, both desks, both papers have been putting the work for the past. I guess we sort of put our stories together the past couple weeks, but I know we even had meetings in December talking about this. So this is always sort of our big thing each and every year. Fridays, the papers will be out all over the place, but just a great opportunity to donate money for a great cause, student journalism. Stuff like this helps us do some really cool things. Like I said, I think Max, I think you were at the Final Four last year. I was there, so wouldn't be possible without you guys. So yeah, super cool. Donate at either website. I know I think each school is trying to get around $50,000. So kind of lofty, but aim for the sky. Why not? So aim for the stars, get the sky, whatever the case is. You guys probably know it better than I do, but yeah,
I think
donate.
the Chronicle is winning by a little bit right now, so we'll see if DTH can catch up.
Yeah,
like I said, anything helps.
Yeah, I think it's the 5th year, and I think it's 2-2 in terms of the fundraising. So I know our the Chronicles, at least GM Chrissy Beck has been saying, this is like the winner take all game 5. There will obviously be future fundraisers, but it'll be fun to see, and amen to everything you guys said. So it's been Alex and I obviously have been in the senior role this year, but seeing everything that our 2 departments have done the last couple of years has been super fun, and the fact that it paid off in the Final Four last year, I thought was pretty sick. But anything else content wise you guys want to shout out next couple days, Alex?
I was just gonna say thanks for coming on, guys. That's always great to get some great minds on this podcast. So we appreciate you guys taking the time.
Appreciate it. Yeah, thanks again. Like I said, you guys have my number if you want to talk about anything. I know UNC plays, Duke one more time this year, so happy to rejoin you. Had a great time.
Yeah, absolutely. That would be great. But yeah, we will. Jonathan, you're covering on Saturday, if I have it correct.
Yeah,
along with
looking forward to it.
Along with Sasha Ritchie. Hunter, I'm assuming will you be in camera on Saturday?
I'm actually passing the reins off to my talented assistant, Shelby Swanson and Lucas Tomei. They will be there. So I'm excited for them, and they're excited as well. Gotcha.
Okay, awesome. Will you be covering the home game?
I will. Yep, I'll be with one of our other senior writers, Evan Rogers. So I'm excited for that one. Awesome. Well, yeah, we'll make sure to tune in again to chronicle.com, dailytarheel.com. Hunter, what's your guys' Twitter handle? Is it at DTH Sports, if I have it correctly? Yep, at DTH Sports sounds good. And then obviously our website, dailytarheel.com, if you want to get in the nitty-gritty /section/sports. But aside from that, you guys know the drill. Yep, awesome. Well, again, tune in to at Duke Basketball if you're listening for Duke coverage. And thanks everyone for tuning in.